I can't lie to you, Sheriff. You're too good a man. Look over your left shoulder.
When movies didn't try to explain everything, they just stepped on the gas and trusted you to keep up. In 1977, Smokey and the Bandit came to theaters and became the wild ride America couldn't stop talking about. Directed by famous stuntman Hal Needham, this fast-moving outlaw comedy starred Burt Reynolds as the Bandit, Sally Field as Carrie, Jerry Reed as Snowman, and Jackie Gleason as the loudest lawman ever shown on screen, Sheriff Buford T. Justice. The story was simple. Smuggle illegal beer across state lines, avoid the police, and look cool while doing it. Today, we're counting down 15 strange facts about Smokey and the Bandit. Stay until number 15. Burt Reynolds' salary for this movie was so huge, it made the rest of the cast and crew look like they were working for free. Now, before we get started, press that like button and subscribe. It helps this channel keep chasing the behind-the-scenes chaos of the movies and shows we grew up with. Now, let's get started with number 1. Jackie Gleason was given complete freedom to create Buford T. Justice. While the rest of the cast was improvising here and there, Jackie Gleason took that idea and pushed it as far as it could go in the best possible way. From the very first day, Gleason had almost total freedom to build Buford T. Justice as he performed. The script was not strict. Dialogue was optional. One of his first demands was that he refused to be alone in the patrol car. He told Hal Needham that he couldn't play the character by himself. He needed someone to talk to, shout at, and completely overpower emotionally for 2 straight hours. That demand led to the creation of Junior, a character who was not in the original story at all. Gleason came up with the entire relationship and dynamic right there on set. Hal Needham later estimated that about 80 to 90% of Buford T. Justice's dialogue was made up on the spot. Lines like, "There's no way that you came from my loins," were not carefully written jokes.
No way that you could come from my loins.
They were Gleason reacting in real time and pushing the character further out of control with every take. Whole scenes came straight from his imagination. The famous diner scene where Buford unknowingly sits next to the Bandit was Gleason's idea. He even gave directions to Burt Reynolds in the middle of the scene, telling him to keep wiping his eyes whenever the sheriff leaned in close to show how physically unbearable the man was to sit next to. The result was a character who felt too loud, too aggressive, and too ridiculous to have ever been carefully written in a script. Buford T. Justice didn't feel planned, he felt completely unleashed. Number 2. Burt Reynolds called the script the worst he had ever read. When Burt Reynolds first read the script for Smokey and the Bandit,
I didn't come all the way this far to go home with empty pockets.
Oh, I've been meaning to ask you that. How come you're following me?
he clearly told the director it was the worst script he had ever read. And when you look at it, you can see why. The script was not even typed. Director Hal Needham had written the entire thing by hand on yellow legal pads. It was pages of loose ideas, half-finished scenes, and general feelings laid out like a grocery list for a car chase. There was barely a plot, barely any real dialogue, and it felt more like a challenge than an actual screenplay. Reynolds told Needham exactly what he thought about it, and then agreed to do it anyway. He had an open space in his schedule and nothing better planned. But more importantly, Hal Needham was not just some director offering him a job. He was Reynolds' longtime friend and former stunt double. He was the man who had spent years being thrown off buildings and crashing through windshields so Burt could look cool on camera. Saying yes was an act of loyalty, a way of paying back a debt built up over years of bruises and broken bones. And here's the ironic part. That terrible script became the movie's secret weapon. What should have been a weakness became the base for one of the loosest and most free-spirited productions of the decade. Somehow, that worst script Burt Reynolds had ever read turned into the second highest grossing movie of 1977, beaten only by Star Wars. Number 3. Most of the movie was improvised. If Smokey and the Bandit feels less like a carefully planned movie and more like a group of friends daring each other to keep filming, there is a very good reason for that. According to Sally Field, there was almost no usable script when filming began. She didn't mean the dialogue was changed a little or that a few scenes were adjusted. She meant there was almost nothing to follow at all, period. Field accepted the role based purely on trust. Burt Reynolds personally asked her to do the movie, and at that time she wanted to do something light and fun.
Once the cameras started rolling, many scenes were created right there on the spot. The actors made up their dialogue, their reactions were real, and mistakes or missed lines were left in. If something felt funny, they kept it. If it didn't work, they just kept driving and tried again. The production was so loose that the script supervisor reportedly gave up trying to keep track of dialogue changes. At that point, trying to organize a movie this chaotic was like trying to control a tornado. It might be possible, but what's the point? And that complete lack of structure became the movie's biggest strength. The rhythm felt natural, the chemistry felt real. The jokes worked because they sounded like things real people would actually say when they're having fun and breaking the rules a little.
Number 4. Jerry Reed was originally supposed to be the Bandit. Believe it or not, Smokey and the Bandit was never meant to be a major movie.
How much money did you say it was?
$80,000.
$80,000.
Director Hal Needham first imagined it as a low-budget $1 million B movie. In that early version, Jerry Reed was not going to play Snowman, he was going to play the Bandit. Reed was already a country music star with natural charm, great comedic timing, and that relaxed Southern cool style that made everything look easy. In Needham's original idea, Reed would lead the movie, make the jokes, drive fast, and carry the whole film with his charm and CB radio talk. Then, Burt Reynolds came into the picture. As soon as he joined, Smokey and the Bandit stopped being a small B-movie and became an important studio project. Universal opened its wallet. The budget jumped from around $1 million to more than $5 million. The production became bigger, the stunts became larger, and the expectations grew higher. That meant the roles had to change. Jerry Reed was not removed from the movie, he was simply moved into a different role. Instead of playing the Bandit, he became Cletus Snowman Snow, the truck-driving heart of the film.
So move over a little bit, good buddy, because the snowman is coming through.
It turned out to be the perfect decision. And in one last twist of irony, when Burt Reynolds chose not to return for Smokey and the Bandit Part 3 in 1983, Jerry Reed finally got his chance to play the main role. Snowman officially became the Bandit. So in a way, Reed was meant to be the Bandit from the very beginning. It just took 3 movies, 1 huge star, and a massive budget increase to finally make it happen.
Number 5. Buford T. Justice was inspired by a real Southern lawman. The name Buford T. Justice wasn't made up for the movie. It actually belonged to a Florida Highway Patrol officer who knew Burt Reynolds' father, Burton Milo Reynolds Sr., the longtime police chief of Riviera Beach, Florida. So, the most over-the-top lawman in movie history was quietly carrying a real badge name the whole time. But the name was just the beginning. Reynolds grew up around Southern police officers. Since his dad was in the force, Burt spent years listening to officers talk, rant, complain, and verbally tear apart anyone who crossed them. That experience shaped everything about how Buford would sound on screen. Reynolds later said his father gave Buford much of his vocabulary. The famous "some" was his dad's go-to word for anyone who stepped out of line. Buford may be exaggerated, he may even be ridiculous, but at his core, he comes from real voices and real attitudes that Reynolds heard every single day growing up. That's why he doesn't feel written, he feels remembered.
Number 6. Burt Reynolds and Sally Field fell in love while filming. By the time Smokey and the Bandit hit theaters, audiences could see that something special was happening in the way Burt Reynolds and Sally Field interacted on screen.
I think we get along and talk and things.
During filming, Reynolds and Field started a real-life relationship that lasted nearly 5 years. It began right there on the set. According to both actors, the spark was instant. Because so many scenes were improvised, their dialogue often wasn't scripted at all. It was just 2 people genuinely trying to make each other laugh, impress one another, and see where the moment went. For Sally Field, the relationship came at an important turning point in her life. Reynolds became one of her biggest supporters. He constantly told her she was beautiful, talented, and fully capable of carrying a movie. Field later said that confidence changed how she saw herself, not just as an actor, but as a leading woman in Hollywood. For Reynolds, it went even deeper. Long after the relationship ended in 1982, he openly admitted that Sally Field was the love of his life. In interviews decades later, he called her the one that got away and said he really regretted that they didn't stay together. And in a movie full of speed, noise, and chaos, that real affection gave Smokey and the Bandit something nobody expected, a true heart under all that horsepower.
Number 7. Sally Field was almost rejected for not being sexy enough. Every great movie has at least one moment when studio executives confidently say something that ends up looking really wrong later. For Smokey and the Bandit, that moment came when Universal Pictures decided Sally Field wasn't sexy enough to be in the film. At that time, the executives only saw her as the wholesome TV girl. Burt Reynolds could not have disagreed more. He had just seen Field give an amazing performance in Sybil and knew she had real acting range. He pushed hard for her to be cast and made it clear he wanted her in the movie. Field also had her own reasons for saying yes. She had spent years being labeled cute and nice and wanted to prove she could handle a romantic lead in a big movie. The role was her chance to shed the TV sweetheart image and show both audiences and the industry that she had far more talent than anyone was giving her credit for, and it worked right away. So, Universal almost said no to Sally Field because she didn't fit their idea of a leading lady. Instead, they accidentally helped launch her film career and showed once again that studios are often very wrong about what audiences really want.
Number 8. Eastbound and Down was written in just a few hours. Some movies spend months looking for the perfect theme song. Smokey and the Bandit did not do that. Director Hal Needham told Jerry Reed he needed a theme song for the movie, one that could explain the entire plot. Reed nodded, went off by himself, and returned just a few hours later. He sat down and played Eastbound and Down.
The boys are thirsty in Atlanta, and there's beer in Texarkana.
By the time Reed finished, Needham already knew it was perfect. He reportedly told Reed something like, "If you change one note of that, I'll kill you." That was either the highest compliment a director can give or a very specific threat, maybe even both.
And we'll bring it back no matter what it takes.
And we'll bring it back no matter what it takes. And the song deserved that reaction. Eastbound and Down told the entire story in under 3 minutes. A long way to go, but only a short time to get there. Trouble behind you, trouble ahead. If you somehow missed the plot while watching cars fly off bridges, the song got you caught up right away. Audiences didn't just hear it once and forget it. The song became completely tied to the movie's identity.
Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking.
You hear that opening riff and you're already moving, already smiling, already speeding in your mind, even if you're just sitting on the couch with a bag of Doritos. All right, let's take a quick pit stop. If you're enjoying this ride through 1970s outlaw chaos, smash that like button. It helps more people find this video. And drop your answer in the comments. Are you picking the Trans Am, the CB slang, or Jackie Gleason yelling at his own son as your favorite moment from the movie? We want to know which part hit you the hardest. All right, now let's get back on the road with Number 9. The movie turned the Pontiac Trans Am into an American icon. Before Smokey and the Bandit, the Pontiac Trans Am was just another sporty car you could buy. After the movie, though, it became a full-on obsession. When Smokey and the Bandit hit theaters, audiences watched a black and gold Trans Am move with style, and almost overnight, that car stopped being just transportation and became part of someone's identity. The sales numbers showed the change fast. In 1977, Pontiac sold about 68,000 Trans Ams. Within 2 years, that number jumped to more than 117,000. Showrooms were packed, and Pontiac struggled to keep up with demand for the black and gold special edition. Pontiac's president was so thrilled with the sales boom that he promised Burt Reynolds a brand new Trans Am every year for the rest of his life. That deal only ended when the executive retired, which seems like the most corporate way to break a legendary promise. The Trans Am didn't just benefit from the movie, it was made immortal by it. Number 10. Smuggling Kors beer was a real thing in 1977. Here's something modern audiences sometimes miss about Smokey and the Bandit. The whole story was based on something that really happened a lot. In 1977, Coors beer wasn't sold east of the Mississippi River. It wasn't illegal by name, but Coors wasn't pasteurized and didn't use preservatives, so it had to stay cold from the brewery in Golden, Colorado, all the way to the drinker's hand. Because of that, Coors only sold it in about 11 western states and didn't try to get licenses anywhere else.
The problem is that Coors beer You take that east of Texas, and that's bootlegging.
You couldn't walk into a store in Georgia and buy it. It simply wasn't sold there. And since Coors wasn't licensed in those states, transporting it across state lines in large amounts broke alcohol distribution laws. No licensed distributor meant no state taxes were paid. In some states, that made you a bootlegger, whether you wanted to be or not. People really did make Coors runs out west, loading trunks and trucks with cases to bring back east. It was one of the country's worst-kept secrets. That scarcity gave the beer a kind of mystique money can't buy. Paul Newman was a known Coors fan, calling it the best American beer and demanding it on set. Coors had the underground reputation that marketing teams spend millions trying to create, and they got it for free just by being hard to ship. The movie's idea came straight from that world. While filming Gator in Georgia, Hal Needham was given a couple cases of Coors by a crew member who brought them from California. He put them in his hotel fridge and didn't think much of it until bottles started disappearing. He eventually realized the hotel maid had been taking them home to her boyfriend because you couldn't get Coors anywhere nearby. Needham later said the whole idea clicked right there. Bootleg a load of Coors, throw in fast cars and lots of cops, and you've got a movie. So the Bandit and Snowman weren't hauling 400 cases of beer just for drama. They were doing something people really did, just with faster cars, worse odds, and Jackie Gleason yelling behind them.
Number 11. The famous bridge jump nearly destroyed the Trans Am. If you remember one image from Smokey and the Bandit, it's probably this: the Trans Am flying through the air like gravity had been politely asked to take the day off. That jump over the broken Mulberry River Bridge wasn't just a stunt. It was a one-shot gamble so risky that even Hal Needham, one of the greatest stuntmen ever, wasn't sure it would work. The gap was too wide, the car was too heavy, and 1970s physics were not on anyone's side. To make it happen, the crew quietly added a secret weapon, a liquid-powered rocket booster mounted at the back of the Trans Am. Without it, the car wouldn't have cleared the gap. Some reports say the crew removed or lightened the engine to keep the nose from diving straight into the river. The front end was reinforced as much as possible, weight was shifted, calculations were done, and then everyone stepped back and hoped the laws of motion were feeling generous that afternoon. The landing was so violent it bent the chassis and destroyed the transmission. That Trans Am never drove again. But that single moment became the money shot, the image that sold the movie, the stunt that told audiences this wasn't just another car chase comedy. This car was going for it with everything it had and worrying about the consequences later, which, if you think about it, sums up the entire philosophy of Smokey and the Bandit in one airborne moment.
Number 12. Smokey and the Bandit started a nationwide CB radio craze. The movie didn't just change what people drove, it changed how they talked. Before the film, CB radios were mostly for truckers, a practical tool for long-haul drivers to share traffic updates, road conditions, and where the cops were hiding. After the Bandit, everyone wanted a CB handle.
It's me they're after. They don't even know clean snow exists.
Oh, they don't. Well, I tell you what we're gonna do.
The CB boom had already been starting thanks to the 1973 oil crisis, but Smokey and the Bandit poured high-octane fuel on it. And with the radios came the language. 10-4, what's your 20? Smokey, bear in the air. People who had never been within 50 feet of a semi were suddenly talking like outlaw truckers on their morning commute. Everyone picked a handle. Everyone wanted to sound like they were part of something bigger than traffic. Accountants were driving down suburban streets calling themselves Nighthawk, full of confidence they hadn't earned. The ripple effect hit pop culture hard. Songs like Convoy shot up the charts. A whole movie followed in 1978. TV shows even used the lingo. For a few loud, chaotic years, America decided the best way to connect with strangers was by yelling into a dashboard-mounted radio at 70 miles per hour.
Number 13. The crew nearly got arrested during filming. Most movies try to look real, but Smokey and the Bandit was so realistic that actual police tried to shut it down more than once. The production drew real-world trouble because Hal Needham refused to fake anything. He wanted real speed, real highways, and real chaos. The problem was nobody told the local cops.
During one highway chase scene, the crew was filming at full speed on a public road when a real police officer, completely unaware a movie was being made, drove right into the middle of the action. The whole production stopped while the crew scrambled to convince a very skeptical officer that this was a real Hollywood shoot with proper permits and paperwork. Meanwhile, stunt drivers and muscle cars sat on the highway shoulder trying to look innocent, which, if you've ever met a stunt driver, is really not their strong suit. Eventually, the officer was convinced, and nobody went to jail, but his cruiser and flashing lights had rolled right through the shot, ruining the footage completely. The whole take had to be scrapped and refilmed. And that wasn't the only run-in. During the shoot, local residents kept calling the police to report reckless drivers, high-speed chases, and what they thought were real crimes in progress. Dispatchers got complaints about a black Trans Am tearing through town like it had somewhere important to be, which technically it did, but it was just a movie set, not a crime. Needham later joked that the production probably caused more real police chases than it actually filmed fake ones. For a movie called Smokey and the Bandit, accidentally running from real law enforcement might be the most on-brand behind-the-scenes story possible.
Number 14. A stunt nearly turned deadly during filming. For all its laughs and style, Smokey and the Bandit had one moment on set that stopped being fun instantly. It happened during the scene where the bandit tears through a Little League field to escape the police. On screen, it looks like reckless comedy. Cars, kids, authority figures losing control. But behind the camera, it almost became something much worse. During the stunt, the driver panicked and nearly lost control of the car. The vehicle went off its planned path and headed straight toward a group of child extras. For a few very real seconds, a lighthearted chase scene was about to turn into every filmmaker's worst nightmare. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. Burt Reynolds later said it was one of the scariest moments of his entire career. The scene still gets laughs in the finished film, but knowing what happened behind the camera adds a weight the audience was never meant to feel and that the cast and crew never forgot.
Number 15. Burt Reynolds was paid more than everyone else combined. By the time Smokey and the Bandit went into production, one thing was already very clear. There was no movie without Burt Reynolds. In 1977, Reynolds was the biggest star, the top box office draw in America. The kind of actor studios built entire productions around, and audiences would show up just for him before even knowing what the movie was about. Universal knew it, and they paid him accordingly. Reynolds was given a flat $1 million to star in the film. At the time, that was an enormous amount for a lighthearted car comedy with a handwritten script and a prayer for a plot. His salary alone was more than the entire supporting cast and crew made combined. Sally Field, Jerry Reed, Jackie Gleason, everyone else on the call sheet together still earned less than Burt. His paycheck had its own gravitational pull. Then things got messy. Just 2 days before filming was set to start in Atlanta, Universal sent in a studio representative, what director Hal Needham later called a hatchet man, with one job: cut the budget by $1 million. The timing could not have been worse. Reynolds' salary was locked, non-negotiable, and untouchable. So when the budget was slashed, the blow didn't hit the star. It hit the movie itself. Suddenly, Needham had to shoot an action-heavy car movie with roughly $3.3 million to work with. The production leaned even harder into improvisation and momentum, which ended up becoming the movie's whole personality, not exactly by choice, but the gamble paid off spectacularly. It's the perfect ending, really. A movie built on confidence, speed, and swagger, carried by a star who knew exactly what he was worth and refused to pretend otherwise. The Bandit bet on himself, and America paid up. And there you have it, 15 weird and wild facts about Smokey and the Bandit. It shouldn't have worked. It had every reason not to, and yet it became one of the biggest movies of 1977 anyway. Sometimes the best thing a film can do is stop thinking and start driving. Which facts surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. If you know someone who still quotes Buford T. Justice at family dinners, send this their way. They've earned it. Until next time.